everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make these cute little Minnie and Mickey pumpkins. It's the same pattern for both. The only modification is for a Minnie, we have this little bow, and obviously for a Mickey we don't. So be sure to grab your crochet hooks and all the materials I'm about to list out and come along and crochet with me. All right, everybody, so for today's project, I have 3 colors. I have this pink, green, and then a little bit of brown. You really don't need much, so these are just some scraps that I have. I'm gonna start with our pink yarn, which is actually going to be the main body of the pumpkin. So here, orange is the main color, but I wanna make mine in pink today. So I'm gonna be starting with that. And of course, I'm gonna have a pair of scissors with me. I have a darning needle, it's plastic, which is really helpful because it can bend, and I don't know, for this project at least, I tend to bend my needles quite a bit. So I have a big darning needle for my yarn to sew things closed later. And I use acrylic size 4, a weight 4 yarn, so because of that I have a US H8 or a 5mm sized hook. These are just my go-tos. Of course you can use whatever yarn, whatever size hook that go together that you prefer. These are just what I like to use. So to start, again, I'm going to be beginning with my pink because I'm going to be making the big body of the pumpkin first. I'm going to make a magic ring with my pink yarn. All right, there we go. And now I'm going to put 12 double crochets into the magic ring. And 12, our last stitch here. So I'm going to close up my ring, pulling the tail at the bottom, but make sure you don't close it too tight because you do want to be able to fit your darning needle through the hole. We're going to be doing that at the end of our project. So just make sure it's not closed all the way and that needle can go through. As you can see, there's a little bit of a hole. All right, that completes round 1. Now for round 2, it's just going to be 12 double crochet increases into every single stitch. And that'll make a total of 24 double crochets all the way around. Here's stitch 24 right here. And I'm gonna go ahead and slip stitch into that very first stitch that we made on round 2. All right, for round 3, it's going to be 1 double crochet and 1 increase. We're gonna repeat that a total of 12 times. So 1 double crochet and then 1 double crochet increase. Again, repeating that all the way around the circle. So at the end of round 3, you should have a total of 36 stitches. All right, so I'm at the end of round 3 here. I have 2 stitches left. So I'm going to be doing 1 double crochet and then into the final stitch, a double crochet increase. So now, like I said, for round 3, you have 36 double crochets all the way around. We're going to slip stitch into that very first stitch and start round 4. Round 4 is going to be 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and then into the 3rd stitch, we're going to be doing our increase. So we're going to be putting 2 double crochets into that 3rd stitch. Do it again. So the pattern is 2 double crochets, and then into our 3rd stitch and double crochet increase. So you're going to keep doing that pattern all the way around, and at the end of round 4 you should have a total of 48 double crochet stitches. I have completed my round 4, so I'm going to slip stitch into the very first stitch. In round 5, you guessed it, we're going to be doing 3 double crochets. So there's 1, here's 2, and here's 3, and then a double crochet increase into that 4th stitch. So again, 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, 3 double crochet, and then a double crochet increase. I'm going to be repeating that all the way around, and at the end of round 5 you should have a total of 60 double crochet stitches. All right, I have completed my round 5 stitches for a total of 60 double crochets all the way around. So I'm going to be slip stitching into my first stitch here. And now for rows 6 through 11, we're just gonna be doing 60 double crochets all the way around. So no increases, no decreases, nothing crazy, just full straight double crochets all the way around. So every single round, round 6 to 11, you should have 60 double crochets. All right, so I have finished my 11 rounds, as you can see. Kind of looks like a little hat, like a little bowl, if you flip it that way. And I have already slip stitched back into that first stitch on my round 11. So now for round 12, we're gonna start making the bottom portion of our pumpkin. And to do that, we're going to do 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, 3 double crochet, and then in the 4th stitch, we're actually going to be doing a double crochet decrease. So that was stitches 4 and 5 are a decrease. So again, 1, 2, and 3 double crochets, and then a double crochet decrease. You're gonna be repeating that all the way around for round 12. So now you should have 48 stitches at the end of this round. So I have now completed round 12, and I've already slip stitched back into that first stitch. So we're starting round 13. To start, we're gonna be doing 1 double crochet, into the 2nd stitch, another double crochet, and then in the 3rd stitch is our double crochet decrease. All right, so to do that pattern again, it is gonna be 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, and then a double crochet decrease. You're gonna repeat that all the way around for this round number 13, and then at the end you should have a total of 36 double crochet stitches. All right, as you can see, I have completed my round number 13, and we are starting to close up our sphere here. And so for round 14, we're gonna keep closing it up by starting with 1 double crochet, and then a double crochet decrease. So again, that pattern is 1 double crochet, 1 double crochet decrease. You're gonna repeat that all the way around, and you should have a total of 24 double crochet stitches. All right, so I have completed now my rounds, and since we only have 24 crochets here, you can see the hole is getting pretty small. So before I complete our last round, I'm actually gonna start stuffing it with some polyfill fiber. And one thing to note when you're stuffing, you want it to be full, but you don't want it to be super stiff, because we are going to be wrapping our string around and pulling tight on it. So be sure you can fluff it a little bit. All right, so now I have my sphere stuffed about how I want it. Again, it's pretty fluffy. I may add a tiny bit more stuffing here at the end after our last round, but again, you don't want it too stuffed. If you start to see the white through these holes, you've definitely put in too much, because that's gonna show through in your final product. So I'm gonna go ahead and insert my hook once again to finish up our last round. And our last round is just gonna be 12 double crochet decreases all the way around. So at the end, you should have a total of 12 double crochets. All right, so here I have my 12 double crochet decreases completed. And like I said, I'm gonna add a little bit more fluff here. But unlike all the previous rounds, I am not going to be slip stitching into that first stitch. Instead, I'm gonna pull a little bit slack here on the loop. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of fluff, and I actually measure out my tail before I cut it, because we're gonna be using our tail to create our sections for our pumpkin. So like I said, once I have my slack pulled, because obviously I don't wanna undo all my work, and I have it stuffed how I like. It's okay if it's a little lumpy, by the way, because again, we're gonna be making our sections and forming it into a shape how we like anyways. So I'm gonna keep my yarn still attached, as you can see, and holding the loop here so things don't come undone. I'm gonna be wrapping my yarn. I'll do it twice and about 2.5 times around the whole sphere, because we are going to be using the string, a little bit less, give or take, to wrap the string around. So to measure that out, like I said, I wrap it around 2 or 3 times. It doesn't take a full 3, I found, but if this is your first time making it, I recommend doing it 3 times so that way you get a little bit of a leeway and you kind of know what you're working with. It's also nice to have extra in case you cut one of the pumpkin ears too small. You can use this string to sew on those pumpkin ears. But because I've done this a few times, I have it wrapped around twice, you can see, and I'm going to cut it right there. So now that I have it cut, I'm going to use my darning needle to close up the sphere just like you would for any other ball or plushie, thing like that. I guess before I put the needle on, I should pull the string out all the way, right? So I'm just going to pull that out, and then we're going to sew this closed. Again, this is your final time to stuff it if you'd like. I'm pretty happy with my stuffing, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And just going to go over and under each of these stitches. All right. Now here's the fun part, at least I think it's the fun part. Boop. All right, we close that pretty tightly. And now we're just gonna make a knot to make sure that this doesn't come undone. So I just put it through kind of some random stitches 3 or 4 times, making a knot. All right, so I got my 3 little knots here, and I'm pretty confident that it's not gonna come undone. So now we're gonna be making our sections of the pumpkin. As you can see here, these little guys right here, and there's gonna be 6 all the way around. Of course, you can adjust this if you want less sections, more sections, you make a bigger guy, smaller guy, whatever you like, but generally I find that 6 makes it look pretty nice. So the first section I'm gonna make is actually gonna be where all these slip stitches are. As you can see, there's a little bit of a ridge already because of the slip stitches, and I just like adding slip stitches whenever I do magic rings or circles, spheres, because I don't have to count or use a stitch marker every time. It's a really easy way for me to know where I'm at. So luckily we can cover it up with this pattern. So I'm going to be taking my string with the needle in it, and I'm going to be inserting into that hole of the magic ring that we made on our first round. I'm going to insert it, I'm going to squish my pumpkin, and I'm going to poke it through the bottom. And as you can see, it came up all the way over here. That's not where I want it. I want it near the center here, where we just finished closing up. And like I said, we don't have an exact center like how we do on the magic ring side. So as long as it's within this little circle right here, this is our last round that we did, it's okay. So I'm gonna be pulling tight. Right, now it's pretty taut with the pumpkin itself, but I want it to be covering the slip stitches. So I'm just gonna move it where I want with my finger. I'm pretty happy with that positioning. Now comes the kind of aggressive part, right? You're gonna take the string from the bottom that's still attached to your needle. You're gonna pull pretty tight. And you want it to be tight, especially on this first round, this first little loop section that we did, because this is the very establishing one that we're doing. And right now there's nothing else to keep it tight. So you have to hold it with your hand. I hold them with my first finger and thumb here. And then we're gonna do it again, but on the opposite side. I like to work opposites, kind of like how you cut a pizza. I'll do these together, and then these two, and then these two. But of course, if you want to do one piece at a pie at a time, you totally can. So now we're gonna do the same thing with, again, my needle is attached still. I'm gonna go back into that magic ring hole. It moved a little to the side, but that's okay. I'm gonna put it in. Now it's a little bit easier to find the bottom. And again, like I said before, it's not gonna be the exact same spot that you put any other hole in, that you put the needle in previously. But as long as it's relatively close and it's in the center, it's gonna be fine. So just pulling that, and again, adjusting using my finger, and then pulling tight. So now you have 2 sections. And you'll notice after I do this second section, I can let go, and it keeps its shape a lot better. That's because we already have a section down and we made that knot originally. So now you're just gonna keep doing this same process of inserting through the magic ring hole at the very top, pulling down to the bottom, adjusting your string to be however you like. Again, I'm doing 6 pieces, so I do it in half and then I do it in thirds here. So I think this is a pretty good size. You're just gonna pull it tight. There you go. And our last time, going through the top, coming out the bottom, pulling through. Get a little bit more of a tail on my needle here. There we go. Adjusting this string because this is not where I want it at all. There we go, more centered. And pulling tight. So as you can see, we now have 6 little sections, and it's okay if it's not even. As you can see, this part is pretty big compared to this guy, but that's okay. It's pumpkin. It's not gonna be perfect at the end of the day. So now I have it pretty pulled tight, and I'm on the back side where the string came out of. Again, this is like around 14. If you look at this side, it's pretty nice. This is because this is where we started with the magic ring, and this is where we closed it up. So now, very similar, I'm going to be making another knot, another 3 or 4 knots, but on this side. And this is where I was saying it's really nice to have a plastic needle that could bend, because obviously there's all these ridges now, and it's kind of hard to make knots. But what I do is I get these strings that are part of the sections that we made. I put my needle under the string, pull it through, and before I pull it through all the way, now there's a little loop, and then I'll wrap my needle under that loop, pull it tight, and there we go. So now I'm gonna put this guy aside, and we are going to begin on our pumpkin ears. So again, because this guy was made of pink, I will be using our pink yarn. And very similar, I'm gonna be starting with a magic ring. But this time, I'm gonna be putting 6 single crochet into the ring. So not double crochet. Obviously, these guys are gonna be a lot smaller. So we're only gonna be doing 6 single crochets for this guy. All right, have our ring here. I'm gonna close it up. Very same thing that we did before. You wanna close it, but not super tight, because again, we are gonna be passing our darning needle through this hole. So make sure you have a little bit of a slack. You can see there's a tiny, tiny hole there. That I know that's gonna be enough to put our needle through. So I'm okay with that. So I slip stitch back into our first stitch of our first round. Now I'm gonna be doing 6 increases on every single stitch. So 2 single crochets into each stitch for a total of 12 single crochets all the way around for our second round. All right, that was our last stitch, and now I'm slip stitching into the first stitch of our second round. And now for round 3, we're gonna be doing 1 crochet and 1 increase all the way around. So we got 1 single crochet and then 1 increase. You're gonna repeat that a total of 6 times. So at the end of this round, you should have 18 single crochets. All right, so I have finished my round 3 here. And for our 4th round, we're gonna be doing 2 single crochets and then an increase. So here's 1, 2, and into the 3rd stitch, it's gonna be our increase. So again, 1 crochet, another single crochet, and then an increase. You're gonna repeat that all the way around, and at the end of round 4, you should have a total of 24 single crochet stitches. Round 4 is complete, and I have already slip stitched back into that first stitch of our 4th round. And now rounds 4 through 9 are going to be just single crochet all the way around. So that's going to be 24 single crochets into each stitch for rounds 5 through 9. Rounds 5 to 9 are done. Now we're going to begin round 10. Round 10 is just going to be 2 single crochets and then a decrease. So we have 1 crochet, 2 single crochet, and then a decrease. I'm going to repeat this all the way around, and at the end of round 10, you should have a total of 18 single crochets. For round 11, we're going to do 1 crochet, 1 single crochet, and then 1 decrease. So 1 single crochet, 1 decrease. Repeat this all the way around, and at the end of this round, you should have a total of 12 single crochets. Now that I have my 12 single crochets completed, I'm going to go ahead and stuff this sphere that we made, because it's gonna be a little hard to do that before our last round. So I'm just gonna stuff. Again, you don't want to stuff too much. You don't want it to be totally full because we're going to be squishing it. So it does still need to have a little bit of give. Gonna stuff. This is probably too much, for example. All right. I'm pretty happy with that. It can squish. So now we're gonna do our last round, which is just going to be decreases all the way around. So decrease just like that. And at the very end of this round, you should have a total of 6 single crochet stitches. Our 6 are complete, and just like we did for the main body of the pumpkin, I am not going to be slip stitching into our first stitch here because we're going to be sewing this closed. But again, before we do that, we're gonna wrap our string around. Now, because this ear is going to be sewn onto the main portion of our pumpkin, we have to make sure we have enough not only to wrap around and make this into a little pumpkin, but also enough string to sew onto our pumpkin. So like before, I'm gonna wrap around a total of 4 times, because again, it only takes about 2 full wraps, a little bit less, to make our little sections of a pumpkin. But we want all that extra slack, all this extra yarn, to be able to sew this pumpkin ear onto the pumpkin. So I have it wrapped around 4 times, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then even from that, oh my goodness, even from that, I'm gonna cut a little extra string just to be sure, because I've had a couple times where I've cut it too short and then it becomes a little bit of a struggle when you're trying to sew these guys on. Now I've got my darning needle onto the tail. I pulled that tail out of our last string, and we're just gonna sew this closed first. It's closed all the way. And now, just like before, I'm gonna be making about 3 or 4 little knots here at the bottom, so that way this hole doesn't come back open. All right, got my knots. Pretty happy with that. So now, just like before, I'm going to be taking my needle and putting it through the magic ring hole at the very top of our sphere. Insert, and luckily, at least my needle is longer than the sphere, so I can see pretty much exactly where I want to go. And that's pretty close to the center, so I'm happy with that, and I'm going to pull through. And again, like before, you can see this little line here. That's where we did all of our slip stitches on each round, and I kind of want to cover that up. So I'm going to use my fingers to direct this yarn to where I want it to go. That pretty much covers it. I'm happy with that. So now pull tight. And again, I'm going to hold this first string tight because nothing else is holding it in place except for my hand right now. And again, insert through the top, find a hole in the bottom, pull through. So I have my 6 little sections made, and just like before, I'm going to be making a knot here at the bottom. Again, about 3 or 4 different times we're going to make a knot, just choosing one of those strings that we made a ridge with, going under and pulling my yarn darning needle through. There we go. I have my knot all created, and my little pumpkin is ready to be sewn onto the big pumpkin. The only difference I will say is this time, make sure to keep your yarn needle on to your tail and do not cut your tail. You want all of this length to be able to sew this guy onto our big pumpkin, which we'll go ahead and do right now. All right, I have one of my ears here, and I have my big pumpkin here. The first thing I'm gonna do is find the side that I like the best of my pumpkin. So, and what I mean by side is 3 little sections, because whenever you place your Mickey ears and you place your stem and all that jazz, your bow, you're gonna be looking at 3 sections of your pumpkin. So I just like to turn it around a few different times. I'm thinking I really like this side. I think I like this side to be my front, which would mean this is my back. These sides look pretty even to me instead of these sides. So now but I know that I want this to be my front per se. I'm going to be putting my ears right here in between these two sections. So one here and one here is where the ears are gonna go. So I'm gonna lay it flat with the front facing towards me so that way I remember where I'm supposed to be sewing. And placing the ear, just holding it in place to see if I like the positioning or not. And this is what it's gonna look like. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm gonna place my pumpkin back down. The first thing is to move your string, your tail, from the center of your pumpkin into one of the sides of your pumpkin. So this is where, again, it helps to have a plastic needle that can bend because it's a little bit tricky to do this. But just pick a hole that's close in the center, and then you're gonna find an edge of your pumpkin. Right, so there we are. See, it's on the edge now, it's not the center. Because of course, we are going to be sewing the edges, basically this outer rim here, to this part of the pumpkin. And kind of the opposite of our big pumpkin here, this down here is our magic ring. That's gonna be our bottom of the big pumpkin. The magic ring of our little pumpkin is going to be the top. I like to have whatever the pretty side is out and showing and trying to hide the quote unquote ugly side as much as possible. So here you can see, because we closed it up and we have our knots down here at the bottom, there's a little bit more ridges and little bumps here and there compared to this side. So I want this side to be up, and I'm gonna be sewing this side down where nobody can see it. So we have our string out, have our placement, and then from there it's pretty simple. You just sew the pumpkin on into place. And there is one side of our pumpkin ear done. And of course, you're just gonna do the exact same thing on this other side. So now we're gonna start working on the little stem of our pumpkin, which is this brown spot right here. And for that, I have just a little scrap bit of yarn, of brown yarn, because it really doesn't take that much to make this guy. But to start out, we're gonna use the brown and make a magic ring. We're gonna put 8 single crochet into this magic ring. Now for round 2 and 3, actually, we're gonna be doing 8 single crochets. So nothing fancy, no increases, no decreases yet, just 8 single crochet all the way around for rounds 2 and 3. So I have my 3 rounds of 8 single crochet done. As you can see, it's kind of like a little hat that is forming. And now for round 4, we're just gonna be doing 2 single crochet and a decrease. So we got 1, 2, and a decrease. Repeat that twice. And at the end of this round, you will have a total of 6 single crochet stitches. Now we have 6. And finally, for rounds 5 through 7, you're just gonna be doing 6 single crochet. So that's gonna be 1 single crochet stitch into every single stitch of the round. So I have my 7 rows finished. Now I'm just gonna cut a little bit of a longer tail to be able to sew it to the top of our pumpkin. Now we're gonna go ahead and make the little vine or the leaf for our pumpkin. So I have my green yarn with me this time. And we're gonna start out just by doing a simple chain of 25. So slip stitch, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 25. All right, I know it seems a little long, but this is gonna curl up once we make our second row. So that's why I like to start out with 25. Of course, you can change this to be longer or shorter, however you please. Then we're just gonna turn and do 24 single crochets. So it's gonna be just 1 single crochet into every single stitch. Now that we have them made, just gonna fasten off and cut a little bit of a tail so you can sew it to the pumpkin body. And here we go. Our final piece is going to be making our little bow for our pumpkin. Of course, if you're making a Mickey version, you don't need the bow, but I like making minis, and especially since mine is in pink, I'm gonna be making our bow. So like I said, I have my pink yarn again, and to start out, we're gonna do our slip knot, and we're just gonna make a chain of 14. So here's my chain. Now I'm just gonna turn and I'm gonna do 13 single crochets. So just one single crochet into each of those stitches. Number 13. Now I'm gonna turn my work and just continue to do 13 single crochets. I personally don't use the turning chains. I think the bows look fine without them, but I've done them with and without, so either way works. And you're gonna do 8 to 10 rows of 13 single crochets. So here I have my little rectangle. I did actually do only 8 rows, like the pattern says, and it's tall enough for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and make just a small tail. I like to make sure for this tail that it's about halfway to the middle, because we're gonna be wrapping some of our yarn here to make like the little ribbon in the middle of a bow. And if I have this tail in the middle, then it's a lot easier to hide the very edge of it. So I go ahead and cut it. Then I'm just gonna hide the tail through our little loops here. All right. And like I said, this is gonna be hidden, so it's okay that this little guy's sticking out. So to make our bow with our rectangle, all you're gonna do is fold it together, just like that, you know, kind of like a little bow tie pasta, or just like a normal bow, I guess. I just like bow tie pasta. And adjust it if you wanna make things even or not. All right, I'm pretty happy with that shape. So now I'm gonna take my yarn, gonna have a bit of a slack down there, put it as close to the middle as you can. Doesn't matter too much because we're gonna be wrapping it around a few times. Like a few times, I don't count, I just wrap it until it's a thickness that I like. But we're gonna be wrapping this back yarn as well. And don't wrap it entirely because we're gonna be making a square knot with it at the end. So you do want a tiny bit of that tail staying out. All right, so I now have my pumpkin with its 2 ears on, and I have my little stem and my vine or leaf completed. So we're gonna be attaching these 2 guys to the top here of our pumpkin. So first I'm gonna start with this little stem. So I threaded my needle, and the easiest way for me to do this is because we have 6 stitches here, I like to do 1 stitch per section. And of course, you're just gonna be doing this right in the middle. Be sure to cover this spot up. And again, this is where that plastic needle is helpful, because since it's not a perfect shape, usually I have to bend my needle to get a nice position and be able to get this exactly where I want it to go. So I have the stem on, and one thing I forgot to say is I choose not to stuff this guy. So as you can see, I can make him flat or poof him back up. I don't think it's necessary to stuff. Of course, if you want to, go ahead. But I like being able to have a little bit of control on how I want the stem to look, especially if I'm gonna take pictures or something. I can manipulate it to be taller, to be shorter, to be, you know, and I feel like I can grab him a little bit better than if he were stuffed. There we go. I have hidden the tail. And because we sewed this, we made this part of the body be the top. Now only my pretty magic ring sides are showing. So finally, we're gonna do this little leaf or vine here. I think it's called a vine in the pattern. And here I just pick a side. I think I want my bow to be on this side. because again, I'm making a Minnie. If you're making a Mickey, this part doesn't really apply. But I tend to put the leaf on the opposite side of the bow just because having the bow and the leaf together is kind of a lot to look at. So I pick the opposite sides of what would be quote unquote the back side. I also like being able to switch. For example, here's a Minnie. I can just flip it over and it basically looks like a Mickey now. So with my back side facing towards me, again, this is the front, this is my back. I'm just gonna pick a side. This part looks pretty open. I'm just gonna sew through. So our final step is to sew our bow onto our pumpkin. As I mentioned before, I personally like to put the bow on the opposite side of our leaf. So as you can see here, the leaf is facing out this way. I'm gonna flip around and I'm gonna be placing my bow right about here. All right, here's our finished mini pumpkin. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoy. Bye.